Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on leadership, job searching, and all things human resources. I'm your host, HR Kyle, and each week we dive deep into topics relevant to professionals seeking to elevate their careers and organizations. Whether you're a seasoned leader, a job seeker navigating the ever-changing landscape of employment, or an enthusiast looking to stay ahead of the curve, this is the podcast for you. Join me as we explore practical strategies, share expert insights, and engage in meaningful conversations that empower you to succeed in today's dynamic workplace. So, adjust your headphones and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another edition of the HR Kyle podcast. I'm your host, HR Kyle, and welcome to another exciting edition, I should say. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I speak about quite frequently, and that is the power of work environments on employee performance. And I think so many of us can relate to this, to where we've been in a less than desirable work environment, and it's impacted how well we do our jobs. And I think if you've been around long enough and you have a long enough career, you've probably been in that situation at least once. So we're going to talk about that today. That's the theme. In segment one, Becki and I will dive into that topic and share our thoughts, ideas, and considerations. And in segment two, I've got an expert who's going to join us, like they always do. And this lady has spoken around the world, literally, on the topic of work environments and their impact on employee performance. And she's also one of those that walks the walk. So we'll have a guest join us for segment two to talk about the topic and dive even further into this theme. But before that, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit hrkyle.com today. Okay, and we're back. Welcome back to the HR Kyle podcast. Today's topic is how work environments impact employee performance, and that's good or bad. And as usual, I'll have HR Kyle Becki joining me today and livening up this discussion. So HR Kyle Becki, welcome back.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm glad to be back as usual. Exciting topic today, and I look forward to hearing your segment two speaker about the work environments with her experience.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun discussion, and she's got some good stories to share, as
Great.
We will as well. So, Becki, I'll turn the floor over to you. I know you've got some topics you want to go over today relative to this subject.
Yep. Today I have 4 questions for you. Normally we just do 3, but we're going to go with 4 questions today. So let's start with the physical work environment, such as office layout or remote work setups. And how does that influence employee productivity and overall performance?
Well, I'm going to tackle one that may be a little controversial because I know it's become popular in the last decade, and that is open office plans. I've been fortunate, or moreover, I should say unfortunate, to have worked a short period of time in an open office environment. And I can tell you, for me especially, that did not bring out my best. Imagine, if you will, the HR function being in an open office where people walk up and they have questions or they have issues or things to talk about, and anybody that's within earshot can hear them and see them. Needless to say, that was a real challenge in the work that I do. I happen to have a coworker as well who found it upon herself to to try to join in on some of those discussions from time to time, and that made it even less productive. So that's one example that stands out to me right out of the gate that from a work environment standpoint is not productive. The other thing that we know, and research tells us this, with those open office environments that are so clever and catchy and new world or whatever you want to call them, they're just not effective. But the research tells us too that women as a group are less effective in those work environments because they feel like they're on stage and that the spotlight's on them. And so often that's very off-putting. And I think it's also off-putting for anyone who would classify themselves as an introvert, as I do. You're constantly on when you're in those open office environments. You never have a chance for a break or just to let your guard down. So that's one prime example right off the top where a work environment absolutely impacts employee performance, but not in a good way. And quite frankly, and all the people that I've worked with and talked with, I've yet to really find one person that says, I thrive in open office environments. Most people don't. But you have these leaders, and I'm thinking of one in particular, who, when he was designing an office plan, took a trip, just happened to take a trip out west, out to California, and he was in Silicon Valley, and he was listening in on a speech where they were talking about how great open office plans. So he designed his office with an open office plan in mind, not considering the true damage that can cause to an organization. I should point out, though, that he did have an office.
Right.
So the open office plan was just for everybody else to be really effective. He still had an office.
Right. And then you can never close your door.
Right, because there's not a door to close.
Yeah. I mean, there are days when my door is literally always open. But there are days it's just like, I got to close the door today and get some stuff done, not talk to anybody, not be distracted, interrupted. You can never do that.
Well, exactly. And I think about my work, back then I'm processing payroll and I have to go to a conference room to do that. I can't have all the payroll documents out on my desk for anybody to walk up and see. Right. I'm processing benefits. Again, I can't have the documents out. Plus, those are tasks where I have to have my head down and just get it done and focus on accuracy. Yeah. Again, I can't have that out. Someone comes up to my desk and they've got a personal question. We've got to go to a conference room to do that. Plus, it makes employees less likely to come up because they know that people are seeing them come up. And of course, then they're asking, gosh, why did you go to HR for that?
Right.
So to your point, yes, being able to close yourself off and get work done, but also having some anonymity to what you do. Mm-hmm. There ceases to be anonymity when there's open office.
Right. And I don't like people hearing my phone calls. I mean, I don't mind making phone calls to whomever they need to be made, but I don't like for people to hear my phone calls.
I agree with that. And again, going back early in my career, I've had where people would listen and then they'd comment, oh, you're talking to that person. There's always an office gossip and they thrive on those type of environments where they can hear the conversations because pretty soon everybody knows about it.
Right. And what about remote work setups?
Those can work. I'm going to point you as an example. I would say, just knowing what I know about you, you're as effective or possibly more. I can't say that, but I can guarantee you're as effective working remote as you are in an office. And part of what I suspect is going on there with you, you're more of an extrovert than I am. So if there's something going on, you tend to wonder what it is and want to be involved in it.
Right.
And when I see you working at home, you are very effective at doing that. Like you have a work area and you're able to do it. Now I'm not a good work from home kind of person. So even when I started this business, HR Kyle, I had to have an office that I go to that forces me to focus. Otherwise, I tend to have some attention deficit. Other things catch my attention and they distract me. Where if I'm in an office, I'm focused. So remote work environments can work, but I think you've got to understand yourself and who they are. And like I say, with someone such as yourself, I think Nathan, my son, is another one that would work well in a remote environment.
Right.
Because they have better discipline. I think I lack the discipline to work remotely over an extended period of time. Can I do it from day to day occasionally? Of course, I do it all the time. But I think if that were my normal work, I don't think I would be nearly as effective.
And I have done both where I work straight remote and go into the office, but I'm at the point where with my position now that I'm doing a hybrid and I really enjoy it because I'm still getting out there. As you said, I'm an extrovert. I need to be around people, the socialization, but I also have when I can work from an office, your office, or at home that those are like my downtimes and I can get more done.
Right. And again, I think what we're speaking to is knowing yourself, whoever you are, knowing where you thrive, what you need, what that rhythm should look like. Because for you, it's more of a rhythm. You almost need hybrid. I've noticed you did not do as well during COVID because you became too isolated.
Yes. Yes.
So hybrid for you thrive on that, especially if you can dictate that schedule a little bit. Again, knowing yourself, you thrive on that. For me, very little hybrid. I need to be in an office, in the office, but I do need to have the ability to close my door or go off somewhere.
Right, exactly. Well, let's move on to the workplace culture, such as open communication and team collaboration. From your experience, what is the impact on employees' engagement and motivation with that workplace culture?
It really depends. It depends on the job, I should say, the job classification and what the people do. There are certain jobs that honestly you can have really good collaboration and not be in the same physical area. I see a lot of IT roles work very well at that. On the flip side, if we're talking marketing and sales, even customer service to a large degree, you really do need more of that proximity in your work environment to foster that open communication. And I think a lot of it comes down to where those people communicate best. And I think if you look at those fields like in IT, they do tend to be more effective communicating written communication.
Right.
Whereas your sales, marketing, customer service, those roles are naturally geared towards face-to-face and verbal conversations. So naturally, they're even between themselves are going to communicate more effectively verbally and in person. So I think a lot of times what we see is these patterns that relate to the nature of the work. Mm-hmm. And that's what we let dictate what those environments look like or that structure looks like. Now, open communication, those kind of things, that's really dictated by leadership. And unfortunately, I think we're as a group, as a whole, most leaders and most groups are only moderately effective in communication. I think communication is one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest failures that I see when I work with leaders and when I work with organizations or work groups and so on. I think the biggest thing that I often need to address almost every time is communication from some level or another.
Mm-hmm. And it's so difficult communicating via email. One of my frustrations is when you go back and forth with an email, why don't you just pick up a telephone and call me? And so many people don't want to communicate that way anymore.
Well, exactly, because remember this, email is not intended for dialogue. Email is intended for monologue. So to your point, the back and forth, email was never intended that way. Just like text messaging really isn't intended for dialogue. And especially as humans, we know this because when we're seeking dialogue, so much of what we get out of dialogue is the nonverbals. Right. The verbals represent the smallest percentage of information that we're getting. What we're actually getting in dialogue is all these nonverbals and the expressions and the tone of voice and all these things. So that's why so often we see emails, that seem innocuous at first and they blow up into this issue and this miscommunication because we're losing all of that context relative to nonverbals.
Right, exactly. What role does leadership play in shaping a positive work environment? And how can leaders ensure their teams feel supported and valued?
Well, here's the thing. Leaders absolutely determine the work environment, the work culture. They are first and foremost setting that. They're setting it in a good way or in a bad way. And what leaders have to remember, and they lose sight of so easily, is it's not what they say. Mm. Leaders think, okay, no matter how I am as a person, no matter what I am, as long as I say the right things, that'll make it true.
Right.
So think about how ridiculous that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I could be a horrible communicator and I'm rude and I'm inconsiderate and all these things. But if I tell everybody that they need to be considerate and open and good, that'll make it true. That is not
Right.
true. It isn't. And so many leaders follow that example, and many of them don't realize it. They're really not good communicators. In fact, they're poor communicators. In
Right.
fact, they set a very poor example. It's the classic, do what I say, not what I do. And unfortunately, organizations follow the example of doing what you do. And when they see people getting ahead due to bad behavior, guess what
Mm-hmm.
example they're going to follow?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're going to follow the bad behavior because that's what's getting rewarded.
Right.
Now, humans are actually pretty simple. They're not as complex sometimes as we like to think. So we follow examples. And if we see something that's being rewarded, that's getting ahead, or that's the norm, that's exactly what we follow.
Mm-hmm.
So if we've got a leader who's rude and inconsiderate and disrespectful and all these things, that's what everybody else is going to be. And I think you and I both know organizations
Right.
that have that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and if any of your leaders or if any of your listeners feel that their leader acts in this way, they could possibly reach out for you to speak about qualities of effective leaders.
Well, that's one of the main talks that I do relative to leadership. And we break it down from there. But the initial talk, when we're just getting into the topic, is that qualities of effective leader. And again, in that presentation, I think what makes it meaningful, and this is the feedback that I've gotten from others, is that I give real life examples and I show where these things make a difference.
Right.
And I point out to the listeners, we know the difference between ineffective and effective. We sometimes act like we don't, but we do. We know what an effective leader looks like. So we get into that and we talk about those things. We talk about examples of what effective leadership actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. And with so many of my talks, and this one's no different, I give listeners and attendees something to leave with.
Yes.
That they can use immediately and begin to put into practice.
Right.
And we have some real fun with the topic.
Yeah, and I have been to some of your events where you spoke on that exact topic, and that's exactly what you do. So I'm going to finish up here today with you. The last question, but I'm going to kind of break it up because there's a lot going on here. How can organizations measure the effectiveness of their work environments and on employee performance?
Well, I think let's not overcomplicate this. If you're an organization that's experiencing a lot of turnover, if you're an organization, when you survey your employees, hey, imagine that, you're asking them what they think. And you're giving them an opportunity to provide honest and open responses, whether they're not fearing retribution or fallback. And you're hearing from them that this is not a good work environment. That's how you know.
Right.
Let the data tell you. You've got high turnover. Guess what? Not a good work environment.
Right.
Promise you. And then that buzzer knows it. You've got high turnover. You don't have a good work environment. I can tell you. I don't know your organization, but I'm going to make that first assumption. I'm very comfortable doing that.
Right. Exactly.
And are you checking with your employees and what they think of your work environment? Are you providing them a confidential way to talk about your work environment? Yes. If you have an environment where there's a lot of conflict and disagreement, and I don't mean healthy disagreement, I mean bad disagreement, you don't have a good work environment. If you have people that are crying or upset or getting angry, you don't have a good work environment. You don't. You may think that you do, but you don't. I can assure you, you don't.
Talk about some key changes that companies can do to foster better outcomes.
Well, one thing I was going to say is that's where we come in. I'd love to go into those situations as a neutral third party and have an opportunity to observe and listen and watch and gather information and provide you that feedback because you're not seeing it. It's a classic, can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
You're so ingrained that that's a normal work environment, and people do that. Just like any other abusive relationship. After a period of time, you think that's the normal, and it's
Exactly.
not. So the biggest thing is have somebody come in like us as a neutral third party and see what we're seeing, tell you what we're hearing. Talk to employees.
That's perfect.
Because I'm amazed at what I hear. And leaders are flabbergasted at the feedback that I give them.
Well, that's great. And how could someone out there listening do that?
Well, reach out to us. I mean, you can certainly go to our website, hrkyle.com. Send me an email, hrkyle@me.com. Give us a call, 330-554-5264. But the worst thing you can do is just sit on it and think, well, this work environment will change. If we just get rid of this one person. No, I've seen it time and again. It doesn't. Right. Work environments become just the norm. It permeates throughout the organization. Getting rid of one person or doing a survey and having some pizza parties, that doesn't change the work environment. Right. You have to make fundamental changes to how you do business and how people interact and what's acceptable and what's not to really change a work environment.
Yeah, those are great ideas. And again, thank you for the conversation. I always enjoy these. I kind of stumbled over you a little bit today, but you still had some great answers, as always.
Thank you, Becki. I appreciate the positive encouragement. Hopefully everyone listening feels the same way as well. And I appreciate you sitting in. This makes it fun for me as well to have these kind of conversations with you and hear your thoughts and ideas and your approach to this also. So folks, we also appreciate you tuning in. We hope you'll stay with us for segment 2, where again, we have an expert come in and speak with us on this topic as well. She's experienced a lot of different work environments and has made her mark on this topic as well. So we're going to take a brief break and we'll be right back with our guest. Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit hrkyle.com today.
Are you stuck in a job you hate? Dreaming of a career that excites you? It's time to turn those dreams into reality with Get the Job You Love by Kyle Patrick Smith, also known as HR Kyle. Discover proven strategies to land your dream job, master interviews, and stand out from the crowd. Packed with expert advice and practical tips, Get the Job You Love is your ultimate guide to career success. Available now on Amazon and other online retailers. Don't wait. Start your journey to a fulfilling career today. Get the job you love, because you deserve a job you love.
Hello and welcome to segment 2 of the HR Kyle podcast. And today we're talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart and certainly a passion of mine. And that is the power of work environments on employee performance. And I'm fortunate here in segment 2 to have a guest join me who is an expert on this topic. She has spoken to numerous organizations all throughout the U.S. on this particular topic. In fact, her passion is creating an environment where people can thrive. And she makes that crystal clear in all the times that we've spoken. Now, she's the CEO of an organization and also the founder of WG Content. Now, they work with hospitals and healthcare organizations to create patient-friendly website content. And any of my HR compadres out there listening, you know how important that is to make sure that people actually understand the healthcare information that they're reading. So she's doing some great work on a couple of different fronts. Her name is Christy Pretzinger. And Christy, welcome to the HR Kyle podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
No, I am as well. And you and I had some good conversation offline that I probably should have taped also for another episode, but that's a whole other issue. But we're going to have a good conversation today. Christy, to start us off, I've given you a little bit of an introduction there, but I know it doesn't do you justice. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'll tell you the probably the most interesting thing that fits in with what we're talking about today is that when I started building WG content, 20 years ago, I told my accountant at the time that if I couldn't build a business based on kindness, I would go back to being a freelance writer, which is what I had been doing previously. So, as anyone who's built a business knows that you certainly have an intention, but then you put your head down and you're wearing every hat and doing everything. So I did that. And then about, 4 or 5 years ago, we were working with some consultants. And the first thing they did was interview all of the employees to see what was the core of our business. And the way they put it was the thing without which we would not exist. And it came back that it was our culture. And I thought, well, that's interesting because this came to fruition. That was really what I wanted when I started doing that, was to really create a place where people could thrive. And so that's really the biggest thing that I've done, I would say. I mean, obviously, the work that we do in terms of the healthcare space and helping people make the best healthcare decision for themselves and their loved ones is important work. But my focus now, I'm very lucky. I have a great team of people who do that on a day-to-day basis. And I focus more on our culture and then also on my upcoming book, which is called Your Cultural Balance Sheet, and on speaking about this topic because I think that together we can reinvent the way people look at the world of work.
Well, and Christy, thank you for giving us that detail. And by the way, when your book comes out, I'd like to be the first recipient of one of those because, again, this is a passion of
Absolutely.
mine. Yep. So put me on your mailing list. Thank you.
Will do.
So, Christy, today, obviously, we're talking about thriving work environments and so on. How would you define a thriving work environment? And number two on that, what do you think? What do you think are the key elements that contribute to employee well-being and productivity?
So the thing that I have worked to do over the years, and one of it, I'm going to back up to the kindness piece first because I think this is relevant to your question. Someone once asked me if I had worked for unkind people, and was that why kindness was my driver? And I thought about it and realized that no, I had not worked for unkind people, but the structures within which they worked did not foster kindness. And so to get to the work environment that allows people to thrive is really what I always say is we engineer the structure and the processes to allow for the magic that is the weaving of the tapestry, which is the relationships and the culture. And that happens when you have the guardrails of the structure and processes, but you allow for that magic to happen in the spaces in between. One of the things that I think has proven to make a difference in our environment is that, and it was really all based on what I wanted, as an employee previously, I wanted to be treated like the adult that I was, that I could get my work done, that I didn't need to be micromanaged. I didn't want to have to ask permission to go to a doctor's appointment or to pick up my child from school, things like that. I just felt like that it felt very juvenile. And so I wanted to treat people like adults. And we do that very much. We have, it's an all virtual environment. No one is, micromanaging anyone. And we focus more on output rather than like, what are you doing every minute of every day? And I think with that trust that these employees all feel that we have in them, they value that and they protect it. And that has made for a very, very healthy work environment.
Well, and Christy, I would go one step further. It is made for a very successful work environment because, so often bosses, and I won't use leaders, I'll call bosses, have this fear that if they create the environment that you've described, that there'll be anarchy and there'll be unproductive employees and this, that, and the other. But I think your experience would tell us that is absolutely not the case. In fact, quite the opposite.
I would agree. And, when I have other people say to me, like, as I mentioned, we are all virtual and always have been, because I didn't want to have an office because I'd have to go there. So that's why I never wanted to have one. So we've been virtual for 20 years. But when somebody will say to me, well, how do you know people are working? And I say, well, I think you might have a hiring problem because why would you hire someone you don't trust? You have to kind of build that through it's the hire slow, fire fast. So you really need to parse that out before you put someone on your payroll. and feel like, and we also do a thing where it's like, if we hire someone and we're maybe not 100% positive, we think they're probably a culture fit, we're not sure if they have the right skills or if they're going to be in the right seat, we'll say, well, let's try this for 90 days. And we don't start them at the top end of the salary. We might start them a little lower. And then when they prove to be a rock star, which really we have excellent hiring practices, they inevitably do, then we adjust their salary accordingly, and we're off to the races. So again, I think that if you don't trust your employees, you have some hiring issues rather than workplace issues.
Amen. So you've talked a little bit about examples, but can you give us some more direct examples to where the company's workplace environment directly impact employee performance? And it could be either positively or negatively, of course. And what lessons can our listeners take from those examples?
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple different things. We have a process that it's called the best of me. And we do this, we used to do it quarterly and realized it was too frequent because people tend to be pretty happy in our organization. But what happens is a person's manager has this form, and actually this is the employee's opportunity to really think about and share in a vulnerable manner with their manager different things. So it's a one sheet, and it's got 4 squares, so it's a quadrant. And in the left quadrant, it says you get the best of me when, upper left. Upper right says you get the worst of me when. The bottom left says you can count on me too, and the bottom right says what I need from you is. And so what we've taught every manager, which I don't really like that term, but I don't know what else to use here, but every person who has direct reports, we've taught them that this is really their opportunity to remember that they have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and to use it accordingly. This is their opportunity to listen, to truly hear what the employee has to say. And the most important square on that is the bottom right, which says what I need from you is. Because if you ask someone what they need from you and they tell you, and then you don't do it, you've blown the trust game immediately. It's an opportunity really for trust there. They're going to tell you, I need you to give me more feedback. I need you to help me stay accountable for XYZ, whatever it happens to be. And you, as their manager, need to follow up and do that. That is one thing that we do that has proven to be very helpful. Another thing that we do, and a lot of companies do this, I think the driver for other people doing it might be different than ours, but a lot of companies give people, when they give them a raise, they'll give them a sheet that says your total compensation, because it's almost like they might be hearing rumblings about people feeling they're not being paid enough. And so they'll add in all the PTO and, benefits and all the different things, sort of like, see, this is what it's really costing us to have you here. But ours is called You Matter. And so that instead of total comp, it says you matter. And then we have a lovely paragraph, because we're a company of writers, that says, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically like that, you are invaluable, and we appreciate that you bring your skills and talents to work for WG Content. And here's how we can, while we can't, you're invaluable, here's how we can compensate you, and we're happy to do so. And then it goes through and lists, all the things that they get. So the thing about that, when we have new employees, when they see that, they're always kind of blown away of the framing of that, because it's not framed as like, see how much we're, paying to have you here. It's like, we're acknowledging you, this person, you actually matter to this organization. And that's something that I believe is a universal human truth, that everyone, doesn't matter whether you're in a family, friendship, relationship, workplace, because everything's about relationships anyway, is everyone really wants to know that they matter, that their being matters.
Well, I love that sentiment, and it takes me to something that, and as we've talked about offline, part of my work is working with leaders and helping them become more effective. And one of the things that I share with them, regardless of whatever the topic is, you need to start from a good place, and that's what I'm hearing in what you're sharing here. What I mean by that is, work from the assumption that the vast majority of the people are good. They want to work hard. They want to be successful. They want to do their best on the job, and so on. And if you start from that perspective, it's amazing the good that comes from that. And what I'm hearing as you're talking about your approaches and how you work with organizations, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, I've often said to people on the team that if you make any assumptions, the only assumption I want you to make is that the person that you're working with has your best interest in mind, or the best interest of this situation. And if you approach any any challenging situations, I don't think we don't really have difficult conversations between employees and things, but even with a client, if you approach it from that perspective, it's sort of the Brene Brown soft heart, hard back, where so you've got a solid spine, but you have a soft heart. If you can approach things from that, it just makes it so much easier. It makes everything so much easier rather than having a hard exoskeleton around your heart. If you're kind of open-hearted about it, you tend to be able to work things out a little better.
Well, and I think we both would agree those are the happier people in life as well.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. So one of the things that I think about, and the reason that I called my book The Cultural Balance Sheet, is because, as I shared with you earlier, I think looking only at the bottom line is aberrant to the way we are wired as humans. We're wired for connection and relationship. And so, while of course, as a business owner, you have to look at the financial aspect of your business, the cultural balance sheet is a different lens. And one of the things that doesn't show up on a financial balance sheet is employee turnover. It really doesn't show up there. And there are many things that we do that show up on a balance sheet. A great example of that is we close for 2 weeks at the end of the year. We usually have a holiday get together, and then for the last 2 weeks of December, we close. And then people come back refreshed, rejuvenated, excited to start the year. They've had some time off. And while that is a real cost, I mean, we have lost revenue. Nobody's working for 2 weeks. But what you can't calculate is the joy with which people return to work. I don't know how you put a dollar value to that, except for the fact that we don't have attrition. People really, really don't leave. I can count on one hand the number of people who have left over the years. They just really don't. They don't tend to leave.
Well, it's so interesting too to hear you say that, because so many businesses, and you and I both know this, they take employee attrition as a given. It's
Yes.
just a cost of doing business. And spot on, what I heard you say is, for you, that's considered an exception. You would not expect attrition to be a cost of doing business.
Absolutely not. And I think that it's very short-sighted to think that, because you have spent, blood, sweat, and tears educating this person, and they've learned your business. And it's like having a library walk out of your door with all the intellectual property that they've left with. That's horrifying to me. If I think about my longest term employee is 13 years right now. And because before that, I was all contractors and things. And so she's the longest term employee, and she is a salesperson. She's brilliant and was here when we were so small. We met in an extra bedroom of mine. And the knowledge that she has going back so long, and plus I always joke that she is like, that's how old I am, a mind like a mainframe computer. She never forgets anything. And it's great because she knows so much history of what we used to do, what we have done, and different kinds of things, that it would be devastating if she left. I mean, it would be devastating personally because I genuinely love and care about her, but also for the business, it would be really bad if she left.
Well, and the other thing, Christy, that sticks out in my mind as we're talking, and as we've talked offline, when you talk about appreciating your employees, what resounding in this conversation is you always get into the specifics. And I think you would recognize the fact that you're doing that, probably not consciously at this point, but that's building that employee up so they know specifically the things that they're doing really well and that they're really good at. And as you said earlier, the value they bring.
Yes, and I do that a lot. It's something that I've learned, as I've learned more about myself, because I really do believe that when it comes to leadership, self-awareness cannot be overestimated in its importance. And learning the effect as the leader that my behavior can have on people around me. So I've learned how to moderate that, and also how to lead with vulnerability. So if I'm meeting with my leadership team, and that long-term employee is on that team, and if I think I know something, but I bet I'm further away from it than they are, I 95, 99% of the time say, I may not have this right because I'm looking at it from a different place. This is kind of what I think I'm seeing. Can you tell me if that's actually happening, or what is the situation, which allows them to, share openly, and teaches me more than likely something I don't know. And allows them to be the leaders that I want them to be, and to speak to me more as a peer. Even though, I mean, I genuinely do use the word love when it comes to my employees, because a definition of love is wishing the well-being for others.
The example for everyone else in the organization that you don't have to have all the answers, that you don't have to always be right. And it makes it okay for others not to know the answer and not to always be right as well.
Exactly. I think that vulnerability is not our natural state as human beings. It's scary to be vulnerable. It's actually very brave to be vulnerable. But I've learned over time that if I can lead with vulnerability, then that allows others to be vulnerable, which then allows us to, you can't have innovation without vulnerability because you have to be willing to say things that you might be concerned are stupid. And, I hate that. But I want people to feel free to do that. And by definition, you have to be vulnerable to be coming up with innovative ideas. And so that I think is really important. To your point, when you say you don't have to have the answers, I think it's important as the leader that you need to have good questions.
Christy, to wrap up our segment for today, and I know we could talk forever because this is a passion clearly of yours and obviously of mine. But to wrap it up in the last couple of minutes, what practical steps for those companies, those leaders that are listening right now, can they take to assess and improve their workplace environment to ensure that employees are not only just surviving there, that's just going to work every day, but they're thriving in their roles?
In my own experience, I would say the thing that made the biggest difference was many, many years ago. I had a coach say to me, "Your company is you, and you are your company, and it won't grow until you do." And back to my point about self-awareness, what I did at that time, and this was what I did, it doesn't work for everyone maybe, but what I did is I started a daily meditation practice. And I started doing a lot of reading in the area of personal development with a focus on self-awareness. And I really learned how to understand the effect my behavior as the leader, what effect it had on the organization. I see businesses with younger businesses. I'm not talking necessarily younger leaders, but even younger businesses, people that don't have the awareness. They think that their employees know that they care about them, but their demeanor and their manner does not demonstrate that at all. And it's really learning about yourself and how to moderate your behavior because you are an adult, which then allows people to see that you do genuinely care about them. I think it all starts with the leader really being self-aware, which is hard work, by the way. It's very, very hard work because you're going to find things about yourself that kind of you don't like, but that's okay.
So, Christy, I guarantee you that I've got a whole group of people listening right now that are saying, where can I apply to work for her?
Well, actually, you can apply. You can go to wgcontent.com, and I believe there's a Join Us button, and we have an application online. And we frequently are looking for people, if nothing else, for associates.
So, folks, there you have it. If you've been wondering how to work for Christy, there's your opportunity to apply and take advantage of that. But again, we've been speaking with Christy Pretzinger. And Christy's the CEO and founder of WG Content. And above and beyond that, she's an advocate, a speaker, and an expert around the topic of work environments and how they influence employee performance. We've had a great discussion with you today, Christy, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kyle. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm glad we were able to finally do this.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this. And folks, I want to thank you as well for joining us for another episode of the HR Kyle podcast. I hope you were taking notes. And if you weren't, I encourage you to replay the episode again with a notepad and paper because some really good, solid, practical advice today was provided by our guest, Christy. But I do want to thank you for joining us again. And I'll leave you with these three sentiments. Stay focused, stay grounded, and of course, stay tuned. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.